So before we start with our formal program, I would just like to show you behind the scenes of what we did throughout the weeks today. Okay, thank you. Hello. 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 Hello.
Good afternoon, we are Team Visual. I am Rahul Dinesh and I'll be your host for today. I'll introduce myself. I'm Rahul and these are my team members: Abhishek, Aditya, Aman, Darshan, Lakshna, Livia, Rohit, Viswas, Vishal and Yashwin. So before we get on with the activities that we have in store for you, let's have a quick recap of the multiple intelligence theory that we learned and implemented successfully over the various life skills classes that we had this semester. So the theory was first proposed by a Harvard psychologist by the name Howard Gardner. So this theory suggests the traditional psychometric view of intelligence is too limited, or in other words, the traditional way of assessing or evaluating one's intelligence based on just scientific and mathematical skills is too limited. So Gardner first outlined this theory in his famous 1983 book called The Frames of Mind, The Theory of Multiple Intelligence, where he suggested that all people have different kinds of intelligence. So Gardner theorizes that people do not just have an intellectual capacity, but have many different kinds of intelligences, including musical, interpersonal, spatial visual, intrapersonal, linguistic, logical, and kinesthetic. So the focus of our presentation will be the visual form of intelligence. So Howard Gardner, in his book, which I previously mentioned, defines visual or spatial intelligence as the ability to perceive the visual world accurately, to perform transformations and modifications upon one's initial perceptions, and then be able to recreate the aspects of one's visual experience, even in the absence of a relevant physical stimuli. So, have you ever been in the company of a person who's really good with their sense of direction? Or how about while you're trying to figure out what's there in a map, he or she has not only found the location in the map, but is en route to the destination. And sometimes don't you just envy the ease with which some people are able to draw? So these are some of the basic characteristics or traits of people with high levels of visual or spatial intelligence. Now, research done with blind patients also show that spatial intelligence is not limited to visual ability. Their sense of space and direction comes from a more tactile experience, or rather through sense of touch and feel. And they show spatial intelligence skills in remembering pathways and navigating through a site, despite not being able to see. Now, let's move on to the next slide. So, some of the things and hobbies we love to do are painting, playing with jigsaw puzzles to get the final image, and then making and interpreting drafts. So a question to the audience over here, would anyone name the person's name or the person we see in the first picture? Correct. Bob Ross is a very famous American author, American painter, and he's seen in the first gift that we have in this slide. So moving on. So a person with several of the abilities I previously mentioned have a very high chance of succeeding in the visual domain. So there are certain people who possess a very high level of this form of intelligence. They include architects, painters, artists, sculptors, designers, graphic artists, filmmakers, cartographers. So for those who do not know who a cartographer is someone who makes and designs maps. And moving on, illusionists, magicians, navigators, and war one of my personal favorites. So even in the army generals who are preparing for war, they should have very high levels of visual or spatial intelligence. Partly because when they are preparing for war, they should have a visual understanding about their enemy's topography and land in order to make the required troop formations to win the war. Moving on, other professions include artists, engineers, interior decorators, photographers, fashion designers, sailors, guides, surveyors, and pilots. So, spatial intelligence is considered as a part of our general intelligence. So, increasing your visual ability will also increase your overall intelligence. So, these abilities can be honed with exercises to boost your visual acuity and spatial intelligence. Several tests have been formalized that use these techniques to measure spatial intelligence of a person. So before we get on with the activity that we have planned for you, let's have a quick warm-up session to train your mind for the upcoming activities. So I have prepared 4 questions, and next 4 slides, you'll be having a timer on the top right corner, which will be counting from 30 to 0.